66 million years ago, an asteroid roughly 12 kilometers across, about the width of Manhattan, slammed into what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico at a speed of 20 kilometers per second, roughly 60 times the speed of sound, and ended the reign of the dinosaurs. 75% of all species on Earth vanished. The Tyrannosaurus rex, arguably the most dominant land predator the planet had ever produced, was gone. The mosasaurs that ruled the Cretaceous oceans, gone. The pteranodons that commanded the skies above those oceans, wiped from the fossil record in a geological instant. And yet, buried in the riverbeds and coastal sediments of that ruined world, tucked inside shells that had barely changed in 100 million years, turtles survived. They are still here. They have been here for 230 million years, longer than almost any other group of vertebrates walking the Earth today. They watched the dinosaurs rise. They watched the dinosaurs fall. They watched the mammals take over. They watched the ice ages come and go. They outlasted every catastrophe this planet could produce. And after all of that, after 250 million years of evolution, a Galapagos tortoise still moves at roughly 1/3 of a kilometer per hour. That is slower than a human toddler learning to walk. That is slower than most insects crossing a sidewalk. So how did the slowest animals on the planet outlive the fastest? How did a creature that cannot outrun anything survive 5 mass extinction events while animals built for speed, power, and aggression were erased from the face of the Earth? The answer is not what you would expect. Because the assumption buried inside that question, the idea that evolution should have eventually made turtles faster, is fundamentally wrong. Evolution did not fail to make turtles fast. Evolution made them slow on purpose. And that slowness is the single reason they are still alive. How does an animal go from a lizard-like ancestor with a normal ribcage and functioning legs to a creature whose entire skeleton has been reorganized around a fortress of bone? The answer starts 260 million years ago in a world that looked nothing like the one you know. Southern Africa, the Middle Permian period. The supercontinent Pangaea stretched from pole to pole, and the Karoo Basin in what is now South Africa was a dry, scrubby floodplain populated by primitive reptiles that would leave almost no descendants. In 1892, paleontologist Robert Broom collected a small fossil from those Karoo sediments that would sit in museum drawers for more than a century before anyone understood what it really was. The animal was called Eunotosaurus africanus. It was about 15 centimeters long, roughly the size of your hand, and it had no shell, no beak, and no obvious connection to anything with a carapace. But it had one feature that made it extraordinary. Its ribs were broadened, not fused together, not curved into a dome. Just wider than they should have been, flaring outward in a way that no other reptile of that era displayed. In 2013, Tyler Lyson at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science in Colorado, working with colleagues including Gabe Beaver at Johns Hopkins University, published a study in Current Biology that finally placed Eunotosaurus in the turtle lineage. Using CT scanning and comparative anatomy, Lyson's team demonstrated that the broadened ribs of Eunotosaurus represented the earliest known stage of shell development in any vertebrate. The turtle shell did not appear suddenly. It was assembled in stages across tens of millions of years, starting with nothing more than slightly wider ribs in a small Permian reptile on an African floodplain. That single anatomical quirk, wider ribs, would eventually become the most successful defensive structure in the history of vertebrate life on Earth. But 260 million years ago, it was just a minor variation in a minor animal. This decision, if you can call an evolutionary accident a decision, seemed small at the time. It was not. By the way, if you want the full system behind how evolutionary deep dives like this one are researched and broken down, I put everything into an ebook. Link is in the description below. It covers the complete framework. Now back to the story. Approximately 240 million years ago, in what is now the limestone hills of southern Germany, a small reptile called Papochilles rosinae was living alongside the earliest dinosaurs. Rainer Schock at the Stuttgart State Museum of Natural History described the animal in a 2015 paper published in Nature. Papochilles was roughly 20 centimeters long, about the length of a dinner plate, and it filled a critical gap in the fossil record that had puzzled paleontologists for over a century. Its ribs were broader than those of Eunotosaurus. And its belly was reinforced with thickened gastralia, the floating belly ribs found in many reptiles, that were beginning to fuse into something resembling the earliest version of a plastron, the flat bone plate that forms the underside of a modern turtle shell. Papacelis was not a turtle, not yet, but it was building toward one. Its body was already sacrificing flexibility for protection. Those broadening ribs could no longer flex the way a normal reptile's ribs did, which meant Papacelis was already losing the ability to breathe the way other reptiles breathed, by expanding and contracting the ribcage to draw air in. Something else would have to take over that function, and over millions of years, something did. By 228 million years ago, the process had advanced further. Li Chun at the Institute of Vertebrate Paleontology and Paleoanthropology in Beijing described Eorhynchochelis sinensis in a 2018 paper in Nature. Found in the limestone quarries of Guizhou province in southwestern China, Eorhynchochelis was larger, roughly 2.5 meters from nose to tail, about the length of a park bench. It had a beak which was entirely new, but still no shell. Its ribs were broadened even further. The animal was assembling the turtle body plan, piece by piece, in a sequence that no one had predicted before the fossils turned up in those Chinese quarries. Beak first, then broadened ribs, then partial shell, then full shell. The features did not evolve together. They evolved one at a time, across millions of years, in different species on different continents. Then came Odontochelys semitestacea, also described by Li Chun and colleagues, in a 2008 paper in Nature, also from Guizhou province. Odontochelys dates to approximately 220 million years ago, and it is the oldest known animal with an actual shell, but only half of one. It had a fully developed plastron on its belly, a solid plate of fused bone protecting the underside. The back, however, was still exposed. The ribs were broadened and beginning to merge, but they had not yet fused into the continuous dome that defines every modern turtle. And it still had teeth, which modern turtles have lost entirely. The animal was a living transition, half armored, half vulnerable. Something that would seem incomplete by modern standards, but was already far more protected than anything else in its late Triassic ecosystem. By 210 million years ago, the process was complete. Progonochelys quenstedii, first described from fossils found in the red sandstone of Germany, had the full package: a complete carapace covering the back, a solid plastron underneath, a beak replacing the teeth, spikes on the tail for additional defense, and a body that was, by any reasonable measure, slow. The entire sequence, from Eunotosaurus to Progonochelys, took roughly 50 million years. To put that in perspective, the entire evolutionary history of modern horses, from their dog-sized ancestor Eohippus to the animal you see in pastures today, is shorter than the time it took to build the turtle shell. And at every stage of that construction, the animal that traded flexibility for armor survived. The unprotected, faster relatives left no descendants you can visit in any zoo on Earth. Pay attention to this next section, because it explains why no amount of evolutionary time could ever make turtles fast again. The shell did not simply add armor on top of an existing reptile body plan. It reorganized the entire skeleton from the inside out in a way that has no parallel anywhere in the vertebrate kingdom. In most vertebrates, the shoulder girdle sits outside the rib cage. Your shoulders wrap around the outside of your ribs. You can feel this right now if you press your fingers along your collarbone. In turtles, the shoulder girdle is inside the rib cage. The shell, which is made of fused ribs and vertebrae covered by plates of dermal bone called scutes, effectively swallowed the shoulders. The scapulae, the shoulder blades, were pulled inward during embryonic development until they sat underneath the rib-derived carapace. This is, as far as anyone has been able to determine, unique in the entire history of vertebrate evolution. Not a single other animal on Earth, living or extinct, has its shoulder blades inside its ribs. Shigeru Kuretani at the Riken Center for Developmental Biology in Kobe, Japan, published research in 2013 demonstrating that this inversion occurs during turtle embryonic development through a process called the folding of the lateral body wall. The ribs grow outward and over the top of the developing shoulder, encasing it in bone. The result is an animal whose entire upper body is locked permanently inside a rigid box made of its own skeleton. That box is extraordinarily strong. The carapace of a large tortoise can withstand compressive forces that would shatter a mammalian skeleton of equivalent size. Some species, like the eastern box turtle, can close their shells completely, sealing every opening with hinged plates of bone until there is no gap large enough for a predator's tooth or claw to penetrate. The animal becomes, for all practical purposes, a living rock. But the trade-off is absolute. You cannot have a rib cage that doubles as a fortress and also have the flexibility to sprint. The fused ribs cannot expand. This means turtles cannot breathe the way you do, by expanding the chest cavity to draw air into the lungs. Instead, turtles breathe using sheets of muscle attached to the interior of the shell that pull the lungs open and push them closed, a mechanism more like a bellows than a pair of lungs. It works, but it is far less efficient than rib-based breathing, especially during locomotion. When a turtle walks, the muscles it uses for movement compete directly with the muscles it uses for respiration. The animal must divide its energy between moving and breathing. It cannot run both systems at maximum capacity at the same time. Elizabeth Brainerd, now at Brown University in Rhode Island, documented this constraint through biomechanical studies of turtle ventilation. Her work showed that the rigid shell creates a fundamental conflict between locomotion and gas exchange. The faster a turtle tries to move, the harder it becomes to breathe. The slower it moves, the easier respiration becomes. Slowness is not a failure of the turtle design. It is a direct, inescapable consequence of the physics of living inside a shell. Evolution did not overlook turtles when it was distributing speed to the animal kingdom. The architecture of their bodies makes sustained high-speed movement mechanically impossible, without abandoning the armor that has kept them alive for 230 million years. And no turtle lineage has ever abandoned the shell. Not once. In 250 million years, not a single branch of the turtle family tree has reversed course and traded its armor for speed. The shell works too well. The bet was placed 260 million years ago, and evolution has never looked back. And what the shell demanded in terms of external movement, the metabolism delivered on the inside. Because the turtle body is not just slow at the surface, it is slow all the way down to the cellular level, in ways that turn out to be among the most profound survival advantages in the entire animal kingdom. A Galapagos tortoise has a resting metabolic rate roughly 1/5 that of a mammal of equivalent body mass. A 200-kilogram tortoise, about the weight of 2 adult humans standing on a scale together, burns fewer calories per day than a single large dog. It needs less food. It needs less water. It produces less waste heat. It can survive longer without any of them. This is not a flaw in the design. This is precision engineering shaped by 230 million years of selection pressure on the rocky volcanic islands and riverbeds where turtles have made their homes. In 2022, a landmark study published in Science by biologist Rita da Silva at the University of Southern Denmark, working with an international team of 114 researchers across dozens of institutions worldwide, analyzed aging and mortality data from 52 species of turtles and tortoises housed in zoos and aquariums around the world. What they found in that data challenged one of the most fundamental assumptions in biology. Most animals senesce, their bodies deteriorate over time, cells accumulate damage, organs lose function. The probability of dying increases with every passing year. This process was long considered a universal feature of complex animal life, as inevitable as gravity. Turtles break the rule. Da Silva's team found that 75% of the turtle and tortoise species in their dataset showed extremely slow senescence. And some showed what biologists call negligible senescence, meaning their probability of death did not increase with age at all. A 70-year-old painted turtle was statistically no more likely to die in a given year than a 10-year-old painted turtle of the same species. The body was not deteriorating. The biological clock that drives aging in mammals, birds, and most other vertebrates was ticking at a rate so low it was barely distinguishable from zero. The protective shell, the researchers argued, is likely a key part of the explanation. Animals with robust physical defenses tend to evolve longer lifespans because they are less likely to be killed by predators or environmental threats. When the probability of dying from external causes is low, natural selection shifts its investment from rapid reproduction to long-term maintenance of the body. The shell does not just protect the turtle from a fox or a hawk. It protects the turtle from the evolutionary pressure to age quickly and die young. Jonathan, a Seychelles giant tortoise living on the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic Ocean, was born in approximately 1832. As of today, he is over 190 years old, making him the oldest known living land animal on the planet. He has outlived the invention of the telephone, the automobile, the airplane, antibiotics, television, nuclear weapons, the space program, and the internet. His heart rate at rest is a fraction of what a mammal's heart rate would be at comparable body mass. His metabolic machinery processes food and repairs cellular damage at a pace that would be classified as clinical failure in any human hospital. And yet he is alive, still eating, still moving across the grounds of the governor's mansion on St. Helena, where he has lived since the 1880s. Slowly. For roughly 160 million years, that slow, efficient machinery operated quietly in the background while the dinosaurs dominated every major ecological niche on Earth. Turtles were not competing with the dinosaurs. They were ignoring them, living underneath them, occupying the rivers, the lake beds, and the forest floors where the giant reptiles rarely bothered to look. They ate what the dinosaurs did not want. They lived where the dinosaurs did not care to go. That arrangement held until the afternoon of a single day, roughly 66 million years ago, when the Chicxulub asteroid slammed into the shallow sea off the coast of the Yucatan. The impact released energy equivalent to roughly 10 billion Hiroshima bombs detonating simultaneously. Within the first hour, a thermal pulse and shockwave flattened forests for thousands of kilometers in every direction. Superheated ejecta, molten rock and debris launched into the upper atmosphere by the force of the collision, rained back down across entire continents, igniting wildfires that may have burned 70% of the world's forests. Tsunamis, hundreds of meters tall, taller than any modern skyscraper, swept coastal ecosystems down to bare rock. Then came the darkness. Ash, soot, and pulverized limestone suspended in the atmosphere blocked sunlight for months, possibly years. Photosynthesis collapsed on land and in the surface layers of the ocean. Temperatures dropped dramatically as the planet entered a prolonged impact winter. The food chain, built from the ground up on plants that needed light to survive, disintegrated link by link, starting from the bottom. But the asteroid was not the only pressure. The Deccan Traps, a massive volcanic province in what is now western India, had been erupting for hundreds of thousands of years on either side of the impact event, releasing enormous volumes of carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide into an atmosphere that was already buckling under the stress of the asteroid's debris. The planet was being hit from two directions at once. 75% of all species on Earth went extinct in the geological instant that followed. Every non-avian dinosaur disappeared. Every mosasaur, every pterosaur, every ammonite in the oceans. The fastest, strongest, most ecologically dominant animals the world had ever produced were gone. Turtles survived. Not all of them. Marine turtles suffered devastating losses. Several entire families of turtles vanished in the extinction event. But the lineage held. Freshwater turtles and terrestrial tortoises endured the darkness, the cold, the starvation, and the total collapse of the ecosystems that had sustained them for millions of years. Tyler Lyson, the same paleontologist who traced the origin of the turtle shell back to Unodontosaurus in the Karoo Basin, published a study in 2019 in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B, examining fossil assemblages from the Denver Basin in Colorado. That basin holds one of the most complete geological records of life immediately before and after the Chicxulub impact anywhere on Earth. Lyson's team found that turtles were among the very first vertebrates to reappear in the post-extinction fossil layers. Their shells showed up in sediments deposited just thousands of years after the asteroid strike, long before most other large vertebrates had recovered. What saved them was precisely the set of traits that make them seem like evolutionary failures to a casual observer: the slow metabolism that burns next to nothing, the ability to go weeks or months without eating, the capacity to bury themselves in the mud of a riverbank or lake bottom and enter a state of dormancy called brumation, shutting down nearly every bodily function while the world above them burned and froze. The shell that shielded them from debris, temperature swings, and the desperate surviving predators that were hunting anything that moved. A Tyrannosaurus rex needed an estimated 40,000 calories per day to sustain its massive body and high metabolic rate. That is the caloric equivalent of roughly 80 large pizzas every single day. When the food chain collapsed and the large herbivores it depended on vanished, an animal with that caloric demand was dead within weeks. There was simply nothing left to eat at that scale. A turtle buried in the sediment of a river delta needed almost nothing. Its metabolic rate could drop to a fraction of its already low baseline. Its body temperature tracked the surrounding environment, requiring no internal furnace to maintain. Some species could absorb oxygen through specialized tissue in the cloaca, meaning they could functionally breathe underwater without ever surfacing, without moving, without burning a single calorie, more than the absolute minimum required to keep their cells alive. They did not need to hunt, they did not need to run, they did not need to fight over the scraps of a dying world, they just needed to wait. And waiting is what turtles do better than any vertebrate that has ever existed on this planet. What comes next is the part that most accounts of turtle survival leave out entirely. Because the fossil record does not show turtles as timid little survivors cowering in the margins of a recovering world. After the extinction cleared the ecological playing field, turtles did something that should permanently change how you think about them. They became enormous. Carbonimus cofrinii was discovered in 2005 in the Cerrejón coal mine in northern Colombia by a team led by Edwin Cadena, then a doctoral student at North Carolina State University. The animal lived approximately 60 million years ago, just 5 or 6 million years after the asteroid impact, in the same steaming tropical wetlands that produced Titanoboa, the largest snake ever documented in the fossil record. Carbonimus had a shell roughly 1.7 meters long, about the height of an average adult human. It was a freshwater predator, likely feeding on smaller turtles, fish, and crocodilians. Its jaw structure suggests it could generate bite forces sufficient to crush bone. Carbonimus was slow. It was also the apex predator of its entire ecosystem. Nothing in those Paleocene Colombian swamps was hunting it. Everything else in those warm, shallow waters was trying not to be caught by it. Go further back in geological time to the late Cretaceous, roughly 70 million years ago, and the oceans held Archelon iscaros, the largest sea turtle that has ever existed. First discovered in the Pierre Shale Formation of South Dakota in 1895, Archelon measured over 4 meters from flipper to flipper, roughly the wingspan of a small Cessna airplane. It weighed an estimated 200 kilograms, heavier than most pickup trucks on the road today. Its skull alone stretched longer than a meter, larger than a basketball hoop is wide. Archelon cruised the western interior seaway, the shallow sea that split North America in half during the Cretaceous period, at a pace calibrated for endurance rather than acceleration. It crossed vast stretches of open ocean, using powerful but measured flipper strokes designed for efficiency over velocity. Speed was not the point. Covering distance while burning as little energy as possible was always the point. And then there was Stupendimus geographicus. First described in 1976, but dramatically re-evaluated in a 2020 paper published in Science Advances by Marcelo Sanchez Villagra at the University of Zurich and an international team of researchers. Stupendimus was the largest freshwater turtle ever discovered. Its shell measured nearly 2.4 meters long, close to 8 feet, and the animal weighed an estimated 145 kilograms, roughly the weight of a compact car. It lived in the wetlands of what is now Venezuela and Colombia, between 5 and 10 million years ago. Males bore large horns on the front of their shells, evidence of ritualized combat, suggesting they rammed each other head-on during mating season, using those enormous shells as battering weapons. Stupendimus on land would have been spectacularly slow. In the water, it was more agile, but even its aquatic locomotion prioritized steady, energy-efficient cruising over anything resembling a burst of speed. At more than a metric ton, roughly the weight of 14 adult humans, it simply did not need to outrun anything. The pattern holds across the entire fossil record of this lineage. Turtles that survived, turtles that thrived, turtles that became the dominant animals in their ecosystems, were never the fast ones. They were the armored ones, the efficient ones, the ones that could outlast everything else in the ecosystem while burning less fuel than anything else around them. Here is the connection that most coverage of turtle evolution misses entirely. The slow metabolism, the slow movement, the slow aging, and the slow rate of genetic change are not four separate characteristics. They are four expressions of a single underlying survival strategy. In 2013, Zhuo Wang and colleagues at the Beijing Genomics Institute published one of the first comprehensive turtle genome analyses, sequencing the DNA of the Chinese softshell turtle and the green sea turtle. What they found in the genetic code matched exactly what the fossils had been showing for 230 million years. Turtles evolve slowly at the molecular level. Their DNA accumulates mutations at a rate among the lowest of any vertebrate group ever tested. In practical terms, the genetic distance between a turtle species alive today and its ancestor from 50 million years ago is smaller than the genetic distance between a modern horse and its ancestor from just 10 million years ago. The turtle genome is conservative. It resists change. It holds on to what works and lets go of almost nothing. This molecular conservatism connects directly to the negligible senescence that De Silva's team documented in their 2022 analysis. When DNA replicates slowly and the cellular repair machinery operates with high fidelity, the accumulated errors that drive aging in other animals build up at a fraction of the normal rate. The telomeres, the protective caps on chromosome ends, that shorten with each cell division in mammals, degrade far more slowly in turtles than in any mammalian lineage ever studied. A lab mouse lives roughly 2 years before its cellular machinery begins to fail. An elephant lives about 65 years. A Galapagos tortoise can live past 175 with no measurable increase in its annual probability of death. Every system in the turtle body, from the molecular repair mechanisms inside each cell to the organism walking across a beach, is calibrated for the same outcome. Duration over speed, efficiency over power, lasting as long as possible while consuming as little as possible. Speed, by contrast, is expensive. Every burst of acceleration demands energy. Energy demands food. Food demands hunting or foraging, which requires movement, which requires more energy. Fast animals are locked in a cycle of relentless caloric consumption. And when the food supply collapses, whether from an asteroid impact, a volcanic winter, or a prolonged drought, the fast animals starve first. Every time. The fossil record confirms this with uncomfortable consistency. The terror birds, the forest racids, were among the most spectacular predators South America ever produced. After the dinosaurs vanished, this lineage of flightless birds evolved into apex hunters that dominated an entire continent. Titanus walleri stood roughly 2.5 meters tall, about the height of a basketball hoop, and could run at speeds estimated between 50 and 70 kilometers per hour, faster than a thoroughbred racehorse at full gallop. For millions of years, the terror birds sat at the top of the South American food chain. They are all extinct. The last terror birds disappeared approximately 1.8 million years ago, eliminated by a combination of climate shifts and competition from mammalian carnivores that crossed the newly formed Isthmus of Panama. Their speed saved none of them when the environment shifted. Smilodon fatalis, the saber-toothed cat, weighed up to 280 kilograms, about as much as a large motorcycle, and was one of the most successful large predators in North American history for over 2 million years. Its 18-centimeter canine teeth, longer than a grown adult's outstretched hand, could puncture the thick hides of mastodons and giant ground sloths. Smilodon was built for explosive ambush attacks and was devastatingly effective at killing the largest animals on the continent. Smilodon vanished roughly 10,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, when its megafaunal prey disappeared. An animal exquisitely adapted to hunt giant herbivores could not adapt when the giant herbivores were gone. Now compare that record to the turtles that shared those very ecosystems. Chelonoidus, the genus that includes the Galapagos tortoise, diverged from its mainland South American ancestors roughly 6 to 12 million years ago. Those mainland ancestors lived alongside terror birds. The tortoises survived. The terror birds did not. The same genus that produced Jonathan, the 190-year-old Seychelles tortoise, has relatives that walked the same ground as saber-toothed cats, giant ground sloths, and woolly mammoths. The tortoises are still here, every single one of those spectacular, powerful, fast predators is gone. Which, looking back, completely reframes the original question. The question was never why turtles are still slow. The question is, why anyone ever assumed that speed was a superior survival strategy in the first place. If you have watched this far, you clearly care about understanding how evolution actually works, not just the version they taught you in a textbook. Hit subscribe. Every week, this channel goes deep on the stories that mainstream science education skips over entirely. And if you do not hit that button, the algorithm will stop showing you this content. The next video covers something far stranger than a 230 million year survival streak. Enter the painted turtle, Chrysamis picta. Found across North America from southern Canada to northern Mexico, in lakes, ponds, marshes, and slow-moving streams. It looks ordinary. Roughly 25 centimeters long, about the size of a dessert plate. You have probably seen one basking on a fallen log if you have ever walked near a pond, anywhere in the eastern half of the United States. This small, unremarkable turtle does something that borders on biological impossibility. In winter, painted turtle hatchlings freeze, not in a metaphorical sense, and not in the way you freeze when you step outside without a coat. Their bodies actually ice over. Ice crystals form in their blood plasma, between their cells, in their abdominal cavities. Their hearts stop beating. Their brains show zero measurable electrical activity. By every clinical standard used to determine life in a mammalian hospital, these hatchlings are dead. Then spring arrives. The soil temperature rises above freezing. The ice melts. The heart starts beating. The brain activity resumes. The hatchling digs itself out of the frost-hardened nest and walks to the nearest pond as though nothing happened. Kenneth Story at Carleton University in Ottawa has spent decades studying freeze tolerance in these turtles. His research, published across multiple papers and journals, including the American Journal of Physiology, documented the precise biochemical mechanisms that make this survival trick possible. As temperatures drop in the autumn, the painted turtle's liver floods the bloodstream with glucose, a natural cryoprotectant that shields cell membranes from ice crystal damage. Specialized proteins regulate the formation of ice, ensuring crystals grow in the spaces between cells rather than inside them. Ice crystals inside a cell rupture the membrane and cause irreversible damage. Ice crystals between cells press gently against the membrane, but do not breach it. The turtle's biochemistry manages this distinction with a precision that no human cryogenics laboratory has been able to replicate. Not a single mammal, bird, or fast-moving reptile on this planet can do what the painted turtle does every winter. It survives because its metabolism is so slow, its energy demands so minimal, and its cellular repair systems so precisely tuned for dormancy that it can cross the clinical boundary between life and death and walk back across it in the spring. This is not an oddity at the fringe of the turtle family tree. This is the turtle strategy taken to its logical extreme. When your body is built to wait, you can wait through anything, including death itself. And there is one more detail that changes the entire picture. The popular image of the plodding, sluggish turtle is based almost exclusively on tortoises, the land-dwelling branch of the order. In water, the reality looks nothing like what you imagine. A leatherback sea turtle, Dermocheles coriacea, the largest living turtle on the planet, can power through the open ocean at speeds up to 35 kilometers per hour. That is faster than most humans can sprint on a track. Leatherbacks migrate across entire ocean basins, covering up to 16,000 kilometers in a single year, a distance roughly equivalent to flying from New York City to Sydney, Australia. They dive to depths exceeding 200 meters below the surface of the Pacific, deeper than most military submarines are rated to operate, and they reach those crushing depths on a single breath of air. These are not slow animals by any meaningful definition. They are endurance machines of staggering capability, built for sustained output over distances that span continents. A leatherback weighing 500 kilograms, roughly the weight of a grand piano, sustains transoceanic crossings that would exhaust a marine mammal burning calories at twice the rate. Freshwater turtles are equally deceptive. A common snapping turtle can strike its head forward fast enough to catch a passing fish, a movement that covers the distance in approximately 50 milliseconds, faster than a human eye can consciously track. The alligator snapping turtle, Macrochilides temminckii, which can weigh over 100 kilograms, as much as a fully grown man, lies motionless on the bottom of a dark river with its massive jaws open wide, wiggling a small worm-shaped lure on its tongue to draw curious fish directly into its mouth. It does not need to chase anything. The prey swims to it. The trap was perfected over 20 million years of evolution and requires almost zero caloric expenditure to operate. This is efficiency refined across a span of geological time that dwarfs the entire history of mammals. Not the absence of speed where speed is needed, but the surgical elimination of speed wherever speed is unnecessary. A Galapagos tortoise on volcanic rock does not need to outrun a predator because it carries its bunker on its back. A snapping turtle on a muddy river bottom does not need to pursue fish because it evolved a trap that delivers them without motion. A leatherback in the open Pacific produces speed when the ocean demands it, but only at the sustainable pace its energy budget allows. The question was never why are turtles slow. The real question was always slow at what, compared to what, and measured against what standard. For 250 million years, this strategy was functionally unbeatable. 5 mass extinction events. Countless ice ages that locked the planet in glacial ice, from the poles to the middle latitudes. Continental drift that rearranged the geography of the entire planet. Opening and closing ocean basins, raising and eroding mountain chains. Asteroid impacts. Supervolcanic eruptions that blanketed hemispheres in ash. Sea level changes that drowned and then exposed millions of square kilometers of continental shelf. Turtles endured every one of them by doing exactly what they have always done. Moving slowly. Burning little. Waiting. But for the first time in 230 million years, the turtle strategy is facing a threat it was never designed to handle. Humans. A shell protects you from a jaguar's jaws in the forests of Central America. It does not protect you from a commercial fishing trawler's net, dragged across the floor of the Pacific Ocean. A slow metabolism lets you survive months without food in a frozen riverbed in Ontario. It does not help when your nesting beach on the coast of Florida has been bulldozed and paved for a seaside resort. The ability to wait out a volcanic winter in a mud burrow means nothing when plastic debris fills the ocean currents where your jellyfish prey used to drift. A 2022 report published in Current Biology by a team of researchers including Whit Gibbons at the University of Georgia analyzed the conservation status of the world's approximately 360 turtle and tortoise species. Their finding was stark. More than 61% are threatened with extinction or have already vanished from the wild. That percentage is higher than for mammals, higher than for birds, higher than for amphibians, higher than for fish. Turtles and tortoises are, by the data, the single most endangered major group of vertebrates on Earth. The causes are almost entirely human. Habitat destruction across every continent where turtles live. The global wildlife trade, legal and illegal, which removes an estimated tens of millions of individual turtles from wild populations every year, destined for food markets in Southeast Asia, traditional medicine supply chains, and the international exotic pet industry. Bycatch from commercial fishing operations that drown air-breathing sea turtles tangled in nets meant for shrimp and tuna. Light pollution on nesting beaches along the coasts of Florida, Costa Rica, and Australia that disorients hatchlings trying to navigate toward the ocean by moonlight, sending them instead toward parking lots and coastal roads. Invasive species introduced by human activity, from fire ants in the American South to rats on Pacific Islands, that consume turtle eggs and kill hatchlings before they ever reach the water. And then there is climate change, which is quietly dismantling the reproductive biology of species that have survived everything else. In many turtle species, the temperature of the nest during incubation determines whether embryos develop as male or female. Cooler nests produce males. Warmer nests produce females. Rising global temperatures are skewing sex ratios across entire populations. On some beaches in northern Australia, researchers have found that more than 99% of green sea turtle hatchlings emerging from nests are female. If the trend continues unchecked over the coming decades, some breeding populations will not collapse because adults are dying. They will collapse because there will not be enough males to sustain the genetic diversity required for the species to continue reproducing. The irony is sharp enough to cut. An animal that survived the asteroid impact that killed the dinosaurs, that endured every volcanic winter and ice age and continental reshuffling the planet has produced in 250 million years, is being pushed toward extinction by a species that has existed for fewer than 300,000 years. Turtles have been on this planet roughly 770 times longer than Homo sapiens. And in the span of just a few centuries, a sliver of time too thin to register on any geological chart, humans have driven more turtle species toward the edge of disappearance than every mass extinction event in the fossil record combined. So here is the question that sits at the center of everything in this video. We were taught, from childhood, that evolution rewards the fastest, the strongest, the most aggressive. Survival of the fittest, we repeat, and we picture a cheetah overtaking a gazelle on the open grasslands of the Serengeti, a wolf pack bringing down an elk in deep Montana snow, a hawk striking a rabbit from a clear sky. But the fossil record, written in stone across 230 million years of Earth's history, tells a completely different story. The cheetah lineage is young, stretching back only a few million years. The wolf lineage is similarly recent. Hawks are measured in tens of millions of years at best. None of them have survived a single mass extinction event. Turtles have survived 5. They were here before the dinosaurs appeared. They were here after the dinosaurs vanished. They outlasted the ice ages that killed the woolly mammoths, the saber-toothed cats, the giant ground sloths, and the terror birds. They survived everything this planet threw at them, not because they were fast, not because they were fierce, not because they were adaptable in the explosive, rapid response way we typically celebrate, but because they were efficient, because they were patient, because they built a fortress of bone around their bodies and slowed their internal clocks to a pace that allows them to outlast anything the Earth has produced in 4.5 billion years of geological violence. The real question is not why turtles are still slow after 230 million years of evolution. The real question is whether we will allow the most successful survival strategy in the entire history of vertebrate life on this planet to reach its 250 millionth year, or whether we will be the one disaster in 250 million years of disasters that the turtle strategy was never built to survive. The mechanism that kept them alive has not changed, not in 230 million years. The threat has. If you want to see more stories like this one, click the video on the screen right now.